My name is Selena Whitaker. I am 66 years old, a retired librarian, and a widow who has spent the last 3 years learning how to breathe again without my husband, Graham. I live alone in the same house where we built our life for 40 years, a quiet place filled with photographs, letters, and memories I have guarded like the last pieces of my heart. I never imagined that the most painful betrayal of my life wouldn't come from a stranger. It would come from my own son. I had taken a short trip to San Diego, just a few days of ocean air and rest. But the wildfires nearby delayed flights, and the air quality advisories made me nervous. I changed my ticket and flew home early. I remember dragging my suitcase across the driveway, hearing the wheels bump against the stones Graham placed himself. I was tired. I just wanted to take a warm shower, make a cup of chamomile tea, and fall asleep in my own bed. Then I saw it. A moving truck parked right in front of my house. The back was open, dozens of boxes, some wrapped in bubble plastic, some sealed with thick tape. A rolled-up rug I recognized. My rug, the one Graham and I bought on our 20th anniversary. I froze. For a few seconds, my mind refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. I thought maybe the neighbors were moving out, or someone rented the truck and parked wrong. But then I noticed the label on one of the boxes. Dining room, Fragile Whitaker. My stomach dropped. I stepped forward, slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter something inside me. And that's when I heard it. The scratching sound of metal against metal. It came from the front door. I crept closer and leaned just enough to see without being seen. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. Aaron was kneeling by the lock, a tool in his hand. Kara stood beside him with her arms crossed, glancing nervously at the street. My own son, breaking into my home. I came home early, I said, letting my voice carry just enough to reach them. Aaron's shoulders jerked. Kara spun around. Their faces went pale, like ghosts caught in daylight. The tool slipped from Aaron's fingers and clattered on the porch. That moment should have broken me. Instead, something inside me hardened. I raised my phone. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply pressed a number I had saved long ago for safety and peace of mind. "Thomas," I said when he answered. "I need you on the line, now." Aaron stammered. "Mom, listen, we thought you'd still be gone." Kara tried to smile, but her lips shook. "We can explain." I lifted my hand to silence them. I wasn't ready to hear excuses. Not yet. Before I take you further, let me just say this. If you have a parent, if you are a parent, or if you've ever loved someone enough to trust them with everything you are, please stay with me. What happened next changed my life in ways I never expected, and it might just make you think twice about the people you let into your home and your heart, because sometimes the danger is already inside the family. Now, back to that moment. I stepped onto my own porch with the slow, steady confidence of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. My suitcase rolled behind me, the click of its wheels oddly calm compared to the chaos rising in my chest. Aaron reached out a hand, palm open. "Mom, it's not what you think." I looked down at his hand, the same hand I had held to help him take his first steps, and I didn't take it. I used my key, my real key, and unlocked my door while they stood there paralyzed. The lock clicked, sharp and final. That sound felt like a line being drawn in the sand. Inside, the hallway was stripped bare in places. Pictures were off the walls. The cabinet where I kept Graham's Navy memorabilia stood empty, its glass doors wide open like a wounded mouth. Cold air filled the space where love used to live. I turned back to them. "Call the driver," I said, nodding toward the truck. Tell him you won't be needing that ride. Kara opened her mouth to argue, but I stepped aside just enough to reveal the small camera mounted above my doorframe, its red light blinking. Every second of this, I whispered, is being recorded. There was no screaming, no dramatic scene. The betrayal itself was loud enough. Thomas stayed on the phone. Do not let them touch anything else, he said. I'm documenting the call. Keep them right where they are. I nodded. They're staying. The silence that followed was thick and bitter. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath in the bushes. Aaron rubbed his face with both hands. Mom, we didn't want it to be like this. You didn't want me to see, I corrected him. He winced like the truth burned. Kara's eyes darted from me to the truck to the camera, calculating what lies might still save them. I didn't look away from either of them. Whose idea was it? I asked. Neither answered. Of course they didn't. The moving truck engine hummed. The tape on the boxes fluttered slightly in the breeze. My heart felt like it was splitting open, but I kept my voice steady. You were taking everything from me, I said softly. My home, my memories, my life. The breeze picked up again. The scent of cut grass drifted past. I remembered Graham cutting that same grass every Saturday morning, whistling off-key. My throat tightened, but I refused to crumble in front of them. Kara tried again. We thought, after Graham, maybe you'd want to downsize. You don't need all this space. We were just helping, like family should. Family. The word tasted like rust and regret. I stepped further inside and turned to face them one more time. Family doesn't break in while you're gone. Family doesn't steal what's priceless to you. Family doesn't replace love with a moving truck. Straightened my shoulders, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles ached. This house isn't just where I live, I said. It's where I survived losing him. And you don't get to decide when I'm done. Aaron lowered his head. Kara swallowed hard. I didn't have to yell. I had the truth and the law on my side. And this was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you that was the first moment I ever doubted my son. But the truth is, doubt had crept into my heart long before that moving truck appeared. I rolled my suitcase into the living room, my steps slow as my eyes took in the stripped-down walls. Aaron and Kara waited awkwardly behind me, like children who had been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Except this wasn't a cookie. This was my life. What exactly were you planning to take? I asked, forcing the words through the tightness in my chest. They didn't answer. They didn't need to. The empty patches on the walls told the story. Photos of holidays, birthdays, the first day Aaron left for college. Frames that once held joy now left behind ghost-shaped outlines. I set my suitcase by the stairs and drew in a long breath. My heart punched the inside of my ribs. Something felt wrong. Not just the obvious wrong in front of me, but something deeper. Something that had been building for months. A few days earlier, just before I left for San Diego, Victor Lang stopped me outside the grocery store. Victor has lived on our street as long as I have. He's a friend. In the loose way neighbors sometimes are. Sharing small talk by the mailbox. Watering plants when one of us is away. He hesitated when he saw me, his eyes flicking toward my house. Selena, he said, clearing his throat. I heard a thing or two that, well, maybe I shouldn't say. I tightened my grip on the grocery bag. What sort of thing? It's probably nothing, he rushed. Just, you know how rumors start. Someone said Graham might have planned something. A surprise for Aaron. Something he left behind. That made me pause. Graham, my Graham, was always full of quiet gestures of love. He made plans, tiny ones, secret ones, the kind that only revealed themselves when needed. A postcard slipped into a book, a note under a coffee mug. But a hidden surprise for Aaron? Something big enough for neighbors to gossip about? Victor had shrugged, uneasy. Forget I mentioned it. You enjoy your trip. But I didn't forget. The words stuck like a thorn under my skin. Now, standing in my half-empty living room, the thorn twisted. I stepped over to the closet near the stairs and opened the door. The scent of cedar drifted out. Warm, familiar. It was Graham's idea to keep the cedar chest there, where the sun wouldn't reach it and where memories would stay preserved. The chest itself was a sturdy, polished piece of family history. It had belonged to my mother, who received it as a wedding gift in 1947. Inside were her letters, Graham's navy ribbons, and, until recently, our wedding album. But the lid wasn't shut properly. The latch hung crooked. My pulse quickened. I knelt down and lifted the lid. Clothing and paper shifted. Some folders were missing, neatly removed. There were gaps where keepsakes once lay. Aaron, I said, not bothering to look back at him. Did you go through this? A pause. A breath taken too late. I was just checking what was inside, he muttered. These things are not yours to touch. Kara crossed her arms defensively. We thought maybe there were important documents, things you wouldn't want to get lost if you moved. If I moved, I repeated. When did I tell you I was moving? Kara glanced at Aaron, urging him silently to say something that would smooth this over. But there was no smoothing over the violation of memory. There was no softening the truth that they had decided my future without asking me. I brushed my fingers against the bottom of the chest. My hand slipped into an empty space where Graham's handwritten letter bundle should have been. The absence echoed through me like a deep, hollow sound. I closed the chest gently, almost reverently. Then I stood up, feeling older than I ever had, yet strangely more certain. My phone buzzed. Thomas was still on the line. I'm heading there, he said. Don't touch anything else. And keep them in sight. I'll advise the next steps once I arrive. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Thank you, Thomas. I turned to Aaron and Kara. You are not to leave. You are not to take anything. You will wait here until my attorney arrives. Do you understand? Aaron looked down. Mom, do you understand? I repeated, my voice firm. Yes, he whispered. Kara's jaw tightened, but she nodded. She wasn't sorry. She was calculating. I walked toward the large front window, staring out at the truck that still sat like a vulture waiting for its chance to feast. I imagined boxes filled with pieces of my past, carelessly stacked, labeled with marker as though they were just objects instead of treasury. And that's when the realization hit me. They had been planning this. Not today, not just this weekend. This was coordinated, thought out. The moving truck didn't appear here by accident. The boxes were prepared, items wrapped ahead of time. Someone had mapped out my schedule, knew the exact day and hour I was supposed to return. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. My fingers tightened around my phone until my hand trembled slightly. The cedar chest, the missing albums, Victor's hesitant warning, the important documents, the moving truck. They believed Graham's surprise was money, a secret inheritance, something lucrative enough to risk everything. But all they found were memories. And as I looked at the emptiness carved into my walls and my heart, I decided something for myself. They would not take anything else. Not my home, not my dignity, not the legacy Graham left behind. Some fights arrive without being invited. Some boundaries are drawn in silence. And some mothers, especially the ones you assume are too gentle to resist, are much stronger than they look. This was the moment I remembered exactly who I was and exactly what I was about to protect. I stood in my own doorway, refusing to let panic dictate my breath. Years of calming anxious patrons in a library taught me the power of stillness. I could feel Aaron and Kara behind me, their restless shifting echoing guilt more loudly than words ever could. I walked deeper into the house, keeping them always in sight. "Don't step away from the entry," I told them. "Not an inch." The way they hesitated, eyes darting to the front door as if freedom might still be an option, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't victims of circumstance. They weren't misguided helpers. They were caught. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked, turning slowly to face them. Aaron swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "I meant to. I tried a few times, but you were always on the go. Appointments, errands. You knew I would come home," I said. "You knew I wasn't gone forever." Kara spoke before he could. "Actually, we tracked your return date." I narrowed my eyes. "Tracked?" She glanced toward Aaron again, like she always needed permission to speak honesty. "Your calendar," she said finally. "You're always so organized. Flights, doctor visits, lunches with Mabel. It's all on there." My chest tightened. The calendar app was the thing Graham and I used together to keep from forgetting small joys, ice cream dates, morning walks, the anniversary of his proposal. After he died, updating it became a ritual, a way to pretend connection still lived there, and they had weaponized it against me. "You planned this around my grief," I whispered. "Around the days I try hardest to fill with noise, so the silence doesn't eat me alive." Aaron shook his head. "No, that's not. Mom, I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, letting the truth land and linger. "And you knew you would." I stepped closer to the security camera above the entryway. Its small lens stared back, unwavering. I tapped it with 2 fingers. "This captured everything," I said. "The truck, the break-in, the boxes, your voices, your faces." Kara's expression flickered from anger to fear to something sharper. Strategy. "We live here too," she snapped. "What's in this house belongs to Aaron as much as to you." "My name is on the deed," I said calmly. "Only mine." "That's not fair," Aaron said under his breath. I stared at him, really stared, and for the first time, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Not the boy who used to place dandelions in my hands, as if they were gold. Not the teenager who hugged me after heartbreak. Not the man who cried on my shoulder when Graham passed. This Aaron was hollowed out by something darker, something that made him believe stealing was a solution. "You could have asked for help," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "You could have come to me honest." "I didn't want you to think less of me," he muttered. Kara scoffed. "Look, this place is too much for you. It's wasted space. You should be somewhere smaller, somewhere safer. A condo near the hospital would be practical. You're not young anymore." I inhaled slowly. "I'm 66, not dead." "You can't keep living like this," she fired back. "With memories and old furniture and a yard that needs maintenance, it's time to move on." I took a small step toward her. "You don't get to decide when I'm done with my memories." Her eyes narrowed. "Then you're being selfish." "Selfish?" I repeated softly. "For keeping the home I paid for? For protecting the things my husband and I cherished?" She didn't answer, because there was no answer that could turn greed into virtue. I reached for the front door, not to let them out, but to show them something. The moving truck driver sat waiting idly behind the wheel, tapping the steering wheel while scrolling through his phone. I pointed toward the street. "That man doesn't unload a single box," I said. "Call him. Tell him the job is canceled." Aaron hesitated. I wasn't sure if it was fear or hope that froze him, but eventually he pulled out his phone with shaky fingers. Kara hissed at him. "Don't you dare." "It's over, Kara," he whispered. "We got caught." She glared at both of us, as if betrayal tasted worse when it turned back on her. Aaron made the call. The truck engine powered down and the driver stepped out to start closing the lift. I took a step back inside and closed the door, leaving just a narrow line of daylight between me and them. I looked at my son. "You need to stay right here," I said. "We wait for Thomas. When he arrives, I'm going to walk through this house with him, and we will account for everything missing." "I didn't take much," Aaron said. "Just a few things." "A few things?" I opened a nearby cabinet. "Empty." "Define a few." He looked away. Kara's voice sharpened like a knife. "You can't keep everything. You're clinging to a dead man's legacy." My heart lurched at the cruelty of it. I stared at her, and when I spoke, I did not raise my voice. "You are talking about the man who helped raise your children when you and Aaron needed time together. The man who built that sandbox in your yard and fixed your washing machine 3 times. The man who called you family long before you deserved the word." She said nothing. She couldn't. Aaron finally broke. "Mom, please, He choked on the next words. "I just wanted to make something right." "You cannot make your life right by tearing mine apart," I answered. Silence filled the room again, heavy and raw. I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw a familiar suit and briefcase. Thomas Keene walked up the driveway, shoulders squared like a shield I had never known I would need. I opened the door wider. "We're in here," I called. As he stepped inside, his eyes swept the space, taking in the emptiness where my memories should have been. He didn't ask if I was all right. He already knew I wasn't. "We'll take it from here," he said quietly. For the first time since I stepped out of that taxi, I allowed myself a breath that didn't shake. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't powerless. Thomas took in every detail, the boxes sealed with tape that wasn't mine, the empty frames lining the walls like missing teeth, the open cedar chest near the stairs. His jaw tensed briefly before he turned to Aaron and Kara. His voice was calm but steel sharp. "You both need to remain exactly where you are," he said. "Anything you say or do from this point forward can be used if law enforcement becomes necessary." Kara scoffed. "Oh, come on, we're family. This doesn't have to get so dramatic." Thomas didn't even look at her. "Breaking and entering isn't family business. It's a felony." Aaron's shoulders sagged under the weight of those words. Thomas leaned in toward me, speaking just loud enough for them to hear. "Selena, we're documenting this. Nothing leaves the premises until we finish a full assessment." I nodded and led him toward the truck parked outside. The air smelled like exhaust and regret. The driver stood with his arms folded, clearly irritated about the sudden cancellation. Thomas flashed his ID and instructed him to stay near the vehicle until further notice. Then we opened the back of the truck together. What I saw inside wasn't just belongings. It was history. Mine, Graham's, even Aaron's. Stacked without care, without understanding. In the first row of boxes, the dinner plates we used every Christmas Eve, carefully wrapped and labeled in my handwriting long ago. Behind them, Graham's collection of naval history books. Aaron had once been fascinated by those pages, begging his father to read him stories of ships and storms. I reached for a smaller crate and peeled back the plastic wrap. Inside lay Graham's Hamilton pocket watch in its wooden case. Only the case was cracked, the hinge bent. I touched it as though it were Graham himself, fragile and wounded. "Aaron," I said, turning back, "this was your grandfather's. He carried it every day of his life. You know that." He stared at the ground. His voice came out small. "I didn't pack that." Kara rolled her eyes. "We hired someone to help. Things get jostled. Besides, it's old." I swallowed the rising ache in my throat. Old doesn't mean worthless. Thomas took photos from every angle. The damage, the labels, the contents. His calm precision steadied me. We moved deeper into the truck. My fingers brushed the corner of something wrapped in thick fabric. I pulled the covering aside, and my heart broke a little more. Graham's favorite painting, the one we bought on a road trip to Astoria, stood tilted against a stack of boxes. The frame was chipped on one side, like it had been shoved carelessly. I traced the outline of the wooden pier in the painting, remembering how Graham joked that he would retire there and spend his days fishing. He never got the chance. I took a step back. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out anyway. "How many times did you break in before today?" Aaron closed his eyes. "A couple. We needed to see what was worth keeping." "What was worth keeping?" I repeated. The breeze tugged at my hair. Kara tapped her foot impatiently, gripping her phone like she was already planning her next move. There was no remorse in her eyes, only annoyance that I had ruined her timing. Thomas whispered, "We have enough to establish clear intent and theft." I nodded but kept looking at the painting. My life had been lifted off its walls and boxed up to be sold to the highest bidder. And yet, I stayed calm. Because fury would not help me. Evidence would. I pulled out another wrapped bundle. Inside was the radio my father carried with him when he served in the Coast Guard during the war. The antenna was bent, its speaker cracked. Graham always kept it on the top shelf, safe from harm. And now here it was, broken. I closed my eyes for 1 second, just one. When I opened them, Thomas's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. We found more. Trophies from Aaron's childhood soccer seasons, family cards, the guest bedroom quilt my mother sewed the year we married, every one of them handled like junk. I stood there among the boxes, inhaling the dust and betrayal. "You've been doing this for months," I said, turning to face them. "While I was at doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, church, you waited for moments when I was trying to rebuild myself." Aaron spoke through clenched teeth, eyes glassy. "I didn't want this to happen like this. I swear." Kara grabbed his arm. "You don't owe an apology for wanting a better life." She's holding on to the past. "We're trying to build our future." "My future," I replied, "is still mine." Thomas leaned back inside the truck. "Selena, let's keep documenting." I moved to the edge of the ramp and looked at the house I have kept alive through years of love and loss. And then I looked at my son, the one I trusted with everything. He looked smaller than I remembered, scared, ashamed, but not enough to stop what he started. "We'll finish this inventory," Thomas said firmly. "Every piece counts." I nodded. I felt a steadiness returning, a sense of purpose that surprised even me. If they wanted to strip my home, they were going to have to face exactly what they destroyed, and I was going to make sure there was a record of all of it. I asked Thomas for a moment. I needed to walk through my home myself, to see with my own eyes what had been changed, what had been taken, what had been broken beyond repair. He stepped aside, letting me take the lead. My hand brushed the wall as I moved. As if touching the house could calm both of us, I headed into the living room first. The shelves that once displayed Graham's Navy keepsakes were empty. I opened the cabinet below, hoping maybe they had just been moved lower for packing. But the felt lining stared back untouched. Empty. I took a slow breath and reminded myself. We were gathering proof. Emotions later. I turned toward the hallway where a familiar wooden frame leaned against the wall. Just the frame. No photograph inside. It used to hold a picture of Graham and Aaron at the father-son baseball game, both wearing matching Mariners caps, both laughing at a joke neither remembered later. The glass was cracked. A small shard crunched under my shoe. I looked at Aaron. "How could you take that?" I asked quietly. He shifted uncomfortably. Kara stepped forward like a shield. "It's just a picture. We'll print another one." "Memories can't be reprinted," I replied. My voice wasn't raised, but it hit harder than shouting. The truth has a weight that can crush guilt. I moved into the dining room where the hutch should have been filled with my mother's china. Delicate dishes painted with soft blue flowers, carried through 3 generations. The cabinet doors hung open. Only a few plates were left unevenly stacked, the rest clearly packed in the truck. Thomas photographed the scene while I reached up and opened a small drawer at the bottom of the hutch. This is where I kept my mother's ruby brooch, a gift from my father the day he returned from his final deployment. I opened the velvet box inside, already knowing the answer. Empty. The air seemed colder around that tiny gap, an absence so sharp it felt like a cut. "Where is the brooch?" I asked without turning. Aaron hesitated. "We needed some money. Just a little. We were going to replace it later." "How much?" My voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, but Kara stepped in, arms crossed like a businesswoman at a savings seminar. $250. I closed the box with a soft click that sounded louder than any scream. It was worth so much more. Thomas checked his notes. "Did you sell it at a pawn shop?" Aaron nodded reluctantly. "Leon's place. He gave us a receipt." Receipt. As if that made it okay. I set the empty box down, careful not to let my hands shake. I needed strength right now, not sorrow. "Write everything down," I said, and Thomas typed into his tablet while I spoke slowly. "Ruby brooch. Gift from my father to my mother. Sold for $250. I said the number out loud. 250. A lifetime of sentiment traded for a tank of gas or a night out. The stupidity of it stung worse than the theft. Next, we headed into the guest room where boxes had been stacked against the wall. Thomas opened one and sighed quietly. My father's wartime radio, the one he kept even after the war because he said its static reminded him he was still alive, lay inside. The antenna was snapped, the dials crushed inward as though someone had tossed it carelessly into the crate. I lifted it gently and held it against my chest. The metal was ice cold, but in my hands I felt the warmth of what it represented. Sacrifice, courage, family history older than any of us here. "My father carried this through storms that swallowed ships whole," I murmured. "It survived the Atlantic, but it didn't survive you." Aaron's face crumpled, guilt cracking open like a dam. But guilt didn't restore what was gone. Thomas photographed every angle, documenting the damage. "We'll add this to the claims," he said. I nodded. My throat burned. I refused to cry. We opened another box. Silverware sets gone. Crystal glasses boxed. Framed certificates from my years at the library missing. Kara looked at her watch, impatient, as if this was an errand taking too long. You're being unreasonable, she muttered. These things are just stuff. We need a future. You could build a future, I replied, without tearing apart my past. She rolled her eyes, as though that truth was merely an inconvenience. We continued the walkthrough, room by room. I listed every missing or damaged item while Thomas recorded it all. Aaron helped without being asked, because he at least understood now that there was no hiding from accountability. We ended back in the living room. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, as though counting down the seconds before my patience ran out. I placed a small notebook and pen on the coffee table, my new ledger of loss. One by one, I wrote down each missing item. I wrote carefully, deliberately, as though by naming the losses, I could keep them from disappearing completely. Every line I wrote carved another wound, but also another piece of evidence. My memories are not merchandise, I said to no one and everyone. Aaron's voice broke the silence. Mom, I'm sorry. We were in a bad place. I just thought if we sold some things, we could pay down debt. Maybe help with the house. I didn't think. No, I cut in gently. You didn't think. Kara's mouth twisted. You're acting like we robbed a museum. This house is a museum, I said calmly. Of love, of a life you clearly never valued enough to protect. She opened her mouth, then shut. Sit. There were no rehearsed lines left for this moment. I closed the notebook. The ledger was only beginning, but it already held more betrayal than I ever thought I could bear. I will get every piece back, I said. Or I will make sure the cost is paid in full. Thomas nodded once. We'll take the next step soon. Selena, you're doing exactly what you need to. My gaze fell on the damaged radio again, a symbol of resilience, now bruised but still present, like me. Aaron looked at me, desperation creeping into his expression. Mom, please don't hate me. Hate? No, hate was too simple, too easy. What I felt was deeper, a mixture of heartbreak, resolve, and a rising flame of justice that had been waiting for the right moment to ignite. I don't hate you, I said after a long pause. But I am done letting you hurt me. The room fell silent, heavy as the truth that filled it. This house had been violated. My trust had been shattered. But something else had awakened inside me. The fierce determination of a woman who remembered she still had the power to protect what mattered. And now that I had started this fight, I wasn't stopping. Thomas and I returned to the front hall, where Aaron and Kara stood like children awaiting punishment. Except, this wasn't a timeout. This was the moment their lies would begin to unravel. Thomas closed his briefcase with a soft click and looked at them with professional precision. I need to understand your intentions, he said. Why were you removing items from this property? Who instructed you to do so? And what was the long-term plan here? Aaron didn't answer right away. His eyes darted to Kara, searching for permission, for direction, for a reason that sounded less like the truth. Kara stepped forward, chin high. We were helping, she said, enunciating each word like she was speaking to someone slow. Selena doesn't need all this space. She can't manage the house alone. We thought selling would be best. For everyone. For everyone, Thomas repeated flatly. Yes, she insisted. We'd arrange the sale, she'd get the benefits, and we would handle the process, the paperwork, the commissions. It's what families do. I stared at her. Families ask. They don't break in with a moving truck. Kara didn't look at me. She kept her eyes locked on Thomas, convinced that convincing him mattered more than convincing me. We were trying to prepare for the future. Trevor said it was smart to act before the value drops again. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Trevor? Erin flinched. Kara, she ignored him. Yes, Trevor. He knows the market. He's been planning house flips for years. And Trevor told you to remove these items? Thomas asked. He said clear out the personal stuff first, she answered. Stage the place later for buyers. I felt like the floor tilted under my feet. Stage the place for buyers. They weren't just moving things. They were erasing me. Thomas's voice lost any softness left in it. And the legal authority behind this decision? Selena, to your knowledge, did you sign any recent documents granting power of attorney to either of them? I shook my head. No, never. Erin spoke up finally, but his voice shook. You did. After your surgery last year, remember? We had that paperwork notarized. You were groggy from the anesthetic, and my breath caught. Groggy is not consent. Kara rushed to support his story. You said you trusted us. We were trying to make things easier in case something happened. Evelyn reviewed everything. Evelyn. The name hit like cold water. Thomas's eyes sharpened. Evelyn who? Evelyn Cho, Kara answered proudly, like she'd been waiting to drop that name. She's a legal consultant. She made sure it was all clean. Thomas let out a quiet exhale, the kind you only hear when someone pieces together a problem they'd hoped not to confirm. Evelyn Cho has a reputation, he said evenly. Not a good one. I felt my pulse in my throat. What reputation? Thomas lowered his voice. She's known for drafting broad power of attorney documents. Too broad. Often presented when the signer is vulnerable. It makes it easy for someone else to seize control of financial and property decisions. I stared at Erin. You would take that from me? The right to decide what happens to my own home, my own life. He pressed his palms against his forehead. The guilt poured over him like a cold wave. I thought it was just temporary. I swear, things got out of hand. And selling the house? I asked. Whose idea was that? Erin's silence was answer enough. It was Trevor's, Kara said. He has investors. He said he could get us a fortune and we'd all benefit. We wouldn't have to struggle anymore. Erin has been out of work for 9 months and… Kara, Erin hissed. Stop. Her eyes flashed. No, you stop. I'm tired of acting like we're the villains here. We were trying to secure a future. Your mother has too much space and not enough years left to enjoy it. Why shouldn't we take initiative? Why should this house rot because she's sentimental? I stepped closer, meeting her gaze head on. It is not sentiment. It is my home. Thomas opened his folder and pulled out a printed form. His tone turned crisp, authoritative. Here is what's going to happen next. We will initiate a revocation of power of attorney immediately, effective today. As long as Selena remains competent and independent, the control remains hers. Kara's face went white. You can't do that. We need access. No, I said quietly. You wanted control. Thomas wasn't done. And after the revocation, we'll secure a title alert with the county. That way, if anyone attempts a sale, refinance, transfer, or lien on the property, I'll be notified immediately. Erin's voice cracked. Don't do this, please. I looked at him not as a lawyer or a judge would, but as his mother, with all the love and pain tangled together. Call Trevor, I said, my voice steady. Tell him the deal is off. Kara clenched her fists. He's not going to like that. I'm not interested in what he likes, I replied. I'm interested in taking my life back. Thomas put a reassuring hand on my arm. You're doing the right thing. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I felt the ground solid beneath my feet again. They had tried to rob me quietly, of memories, of home, of dignity, but they underestimated the strength of a woman who has already survived loss once before. Graham gave me a lifetime of courage, and I planned to use every bit of it. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Thomas stepped outside to take a brief call, leaving me with Aaron and Cara once more. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. It felt oddly symbolic. Life continuing in small, mundane ways, even as everything else seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. I turned to Aaron. "You're staying right here." He nodded, defeated. Cara, however, paced like a caged animal. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she muttered. "We were trying to be practical. We're the ones thinking about the future." I didn't respond. She wouldn't understand the kind of future I was protecting, one where dignity still existed. A knock sounded at the door, sharp, firm, present. I opened it to find Mabel Ortiz, my neighbor and dear friend, standing on the steps, worry etched deep into her posture. "I saw the truck," she whispered. "I called you, but you weren't answering. Selena, what's happening?" Her eyes widened the moment she looked past me and saw my son holding his head in his hands and Cara pacing anxiously. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, placing a gentle hand on my elbow. "Are you all right?" I swallowed the instinct to collapse into her arms. Instead, I nodded and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I need a witness. Someone I trust." Mabel's nod was immediate and fierce. "I'm right here." Thomas re-entered, closing the door behind him. "Good," he said when he saw Mabel. "Selena needs someone who can confirm her state of mind and the condition of the home today. We are recording everything." The word everything hit Cara like a slap. Anger flashed behind her eyes. "You're making this dramatic for effect. We can settle this privately." Thomas ignored her and set his phone on the table, the camera facing outward. "This is a lawful documentation of property damage and attempted theft. If you interfere, we can escalate." "No one is escalating anything," Aaron said quickly. His voice was small, a child's voice lost in a man's body. I stepped forward, the heels of my shoes clicking softly on the wooden floor. "We will continue documenting, and you both will stand there silently until I'm finished." Thomas motioned for me to continue walking through the house. Mabel followed closely behind, her presence a warm shield against the chill of betrayal. She whispered, "I had no idea, honey." "I didn't either," I said, my voice catching for the first time. "But now I know." We moved to the back door. Thomas studied the metal lock carefully. A deep scratch ran across its surface where someone had forced a tool inside. "They tried here too," he said. Cara groaned. "We were going to fix that once the house sold." Thomas tapped the damaged lock. "This door represents forced entry, another mark against you." Kara's lips pressed tight. Aaron looked sick. I called Raj Patel, the locksmith I've hired for years. He always told me to call him if I ever felt unsafe. Today, his words rang louder than ever. He arrived within 20 minutes, a small bag of tools over his shoulder. "Miss Selena," he greeted, his face tightening when he saw the condition of my home. "What happened?" "I need all 3 locks changed," I said. "Front door, back door, and the one on the side by the garage. And I want reinforced deadbolts on everyone, today." Thomas nodded. "Document that this is a protective measure taken at the homeowner's request." Aaron spoke up timidly. "Are you locking us out? We live here with you." "No," I replied. "You visit here. You never lived here. and you won't step inside this house again without my permission. Raj immediately got to work. The drill buzzed loudly in the quiet house. Each turn of the screwdriver sounded like a promise being secured. The first old lock fell into Raj's gloved hand with a dull clink. Freedom in a small metal shell. Kara's patience snapped. "This is insulting. You're treating us like criminals." Thomas turned his head slightly. Breaking into someone's home and attempting to remove thousands of dollars in personal property does classify as a crime. Raj moved to the back door next. The drill whirred again. Click. Another lock gone. Another boundary reclaimed. Mabel squeezed my hand. "You're doing good," she murmured. "You're standing up for yourself." The last lock change took longer. The door that Graham installed himself was thicker, tougher. The wood had aged well, stronger with time, like I hoped I could be. Raj finally stepped back, wiping his forehead. "Try it," he said. I turned the key. A firm, solid click echoed through the room. It was the most comforting sound I'd heard all day. "Thank you," I told Raj. He smiled warmly. "Anytime, Miss Selena. You're safe now." Kara scoffed. "Not safe. Alone. There's a difference." Mabel turned to her, voice calm but razor sharp. "She's not alone. She has people who care about her for real reasons. You just want what she owns." I saw Aaron flinch at that. Thomas collected his files and stood tall. "Selena, you now have physical control restored. The next step is gathering every piece of evidence, completing restitution paperwork, and ensuring no unauthorized access going forward." I took a deep breath. The house felt different already. Heavier and lighter at the same time, like a storm had passed, but the earth was still trembling. Aaron looked at me with red eyes. "Mom, what happens now?" I met his gaze, steady and strong. "Now?" I said. "Now we account for everything, and you accept responsibility for every single thing you tried to take from me." Raj packed up his tools. Mabel stood firmly by my side. Thomas waited for my signal to move forward. I looked around the home I thought was safe, and I made myself a quiet vow. They would never breach it again. With the locks changed and Mabel by my side, something inside me settled into place. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't confused. I was certain. This was my home, and I was now the one in control of the narrative. Thomas guided me toward the dining table where my notebook still lay open, ready to capture the truth item by item. "We'll finish documenting everything that's missing or damaged," he said calmly. "This will support both restitution and any legal steps that might follow." Aaron hovered by the entryway, his shoulders curling inward, as if he wished he could disappear entirely. Kara leaned against the wall, arms locked tight, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. She was calculating escape, not remorse. I could practically hear the gears turning in her mind. Mabel pulled out her phone. "I'm going to film this," she said, "just in case they change their story later." Thomas nodded approvingly. A witness with video is invaluable. I began taking photographs myself. The empty shelves, the scuffs on the walls where large frames had been pulled down, the hollow cabinet that once held my family's heirlooms. Every click of the camera added another layer of truth they couldn't twist. Thomas asked me to sit, and together we began forming a meticulous list. I wrote each word slowly, making sure my handwriting was clear and precise. Silver candlesticks. Anniversary gift from Graham, missing. Library award plaque, missing. Signed photograph of Graham's naval crew, missing. Trophy shelf from Aaron's childhood. Removed. Aaron winced each time his name appeared in the ledger. Guilt has a sound, and in that moment, it was his shallow breathing. Mabel paused beside the mantel. "Selena," she whispered. "The locket. Is it gone too?" I stepped closer. The tiny hook where my mother's locket usually hung was bare. My chest tightened as if a hand had squeezed the air from my lungs. "That locket was all I had left of her," I murmured. Thomas made sure to photograph the empty hook before noting it down. Proof. Always proof. I opened the side drawer below the mantel, hoping for a miracle. Instead, I found a folded piece of paper that didn't belong there. A receipt. Mabel gasped softly as I unfolded it. Leon's Pawn Emporium, Portland. Item: antique brooch, ruby. Price: paid $250. Sold by A. Whitaker. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. 250. A number that would echo through me long after this day ended. "We'll call Leon later," Thomas said. "He'll need to verify the sale. Pawn shops are required to keep detailed records. This helps our case significantly." I nodded, grateful for his clarity in a moment where everything inside me felt clouded. We continued moving through the house, checking cabinets, closets, drawers. Mabel photographed items that remained, while Thomas carefully built a digital and written record of every loss. In the living room, a stack of DVDs had been left unboxed, but the limited edition set Graham surprised me with on my birthday was gone. I wrote it in the ledger. Another memory reduced to inventory. When we entered the study, I froze. The desk drawers were open, papers shuffled and tossed aside. My hands shook as I searched through them. "Graham's letters," I whispered. "They're missing." Aaron closed his eyes as if bracing for impact. Kara crossed her arms tighter. Thomas leaned forward. "Are you sure about what was inside?" "Yes." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "He wrote me letters for years. Each anniversary, each birthday. He left notes around the house when work was stressful, and he knew I needed reminders that I wasn't facing life alone. I kept them here, safe." Mabel whispered a prayer under her breath. Those letters weren't worth $1 to anyone else, but they were priceless to me. I turned and faced my son. "Aaron, did you take those too?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I swear, Mom, I didn't touch anything in here." I could almost believe him. This didn't feel like Aaron's kind of theft. Letters don't pay debt. Kara exhaled sharply, and that was all the confession I needed. "You sold a brooch. You packed my china. You broke into my cedar chest," I said, looking directly at her. "Don't pretend you left my marriage alone." She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She simply looked away. Thomas continued documenting, his voice firm but gentle. "We'll mark the letters as missing. We'll work to track everything down." I wrote the words anyway, my pen scratching across the page like it was cutting into me. Graham's personal letters, missing. I set the pen down and closed the notebook carefully. Not defeated, decided. "We have what we need for now," Thomas said. "The next step is to secure everything left and make formal demands for return of stolen property." I nodded, gathering the strength that seemed to be growing roots inside me. I looked at Aaron, my voice steady, but not unkind. "You will return every single thing you took, every box, every object, every memory you tried to uproot." He nodded, tears welling. "I will, I swear." Kara scoffed again. "You swear too much." Mabel stepped forward, fire in her voice. "And you lie too easily." Kara's jaw locked shut. I stood in the center of my home, surrounded by the spaces love used to fill, and I made myself one final promise. This house will not be emptied, not by desperation, not by greed, not by anyone. What is mine will be mine again, and what has been damaged, I will make sure someone pays to restore it. Thomas and I moved to the kitchen table where he spread out a neat stack of legal documents. The afternoon sun filtered through the window blinds, slicing the room into lines of light and shadow. It felt symbolic. This house had been divided by betrayal, but here we were, pulling everything back into order. He tapped a printed packet. This is the power of attorney revocation. Once you sign, it's immediately effective. We'll file a copy with the county and send secured notice to all relevant institutions. I looked at the bold heading. Revocation of power of attorney. A simple title for something that restored so much dignity. Read it fully, Thomas urged. I know it's overwhelming, but it's important. I nodded and scanned each line. The document was clear. My decisions were my own again. No fine print. No gaps for manipulation. My heart steadied with each sentence. Kara hovered near the doorway, arms locked tight, jaw clenched. She looked like someone watching her grip on a fortune slip away grain by grain. When I signed the final line, my hand trembled, not from fear, but relief. Click. The pen cap secured that victory in place. Thomas placed the document into a folder and immediately pulled up his laptop. Next step, title alert. What's that? Aaron asked, his voice small. It's a service through the county, Thomas explained without looking up. If anyone attempts to sell, transfer, refinance, or put a lien on this home, I'll be notified instantly. It prevents unauthorized transactions. Kara's eyes widened. You're locking everything down. No, I said quietly. I'm protecting everything I've built. Thomas typed a few final commands. There, it's active. Just like that, the house was no longer vulnerable to their schemes. It belonged to me again, not just on paper, but in power. And now, Thomas continued, we file restitution demands. He slid another form across the table. This one, I could tell, would hurt them more than any lawyer's threat. It listed every item we had documented, missing or damaged, with space for return deadlines and repayment details. This gives them 30 days to return all property or pay full replacement value, Thomas said. Failure to comply means escalation to law enforcement, and we include a no-contact clause regarding the house. They are not to enter without written permission from you. Aaron's face flushed with panic. Mom, I'll do whatever you want. I'll make it right. Just please don't take this further. I looked at the boy I once rocked to sleep, now a grown man desperately trying to reverse the consequences he set into motion. You already took it further, I replied. Thomas wasn't finished. One more thing. We schedule an appointment with a notary, an independent one, not someone connected to Evelyn Cho. Kara stiffened visibly at that name. She tried to mask it, but guilt leaves cracks for everyone to see. Thomas closed the folder firmly. We move fast, before your son and daughter-in-law make the situation any worse. Aaron nodded instantly. Kara didn't nod at all. I pushed the ledger toward Thomas so he could attach the documentation. Every item labeled, every memory accounted for, every wrong now a matter of record. Selena, he said softly, placing a respectful hand on my arm. You did the right thing today. This is how you protect yourself. With facts, with law, with resolve. I breathed deeply. For the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. Mabel stepped closer, her voice a warm embrace. You're stronger than they ever imagined. I looked up at both of them, grateful beyond words. I didn't know I would need to be. Outside, the moving truck made a loud clank as the driver secured the ramp. It was a final note to the end of their attempted takeover, the sound of departure before accountability set in. Aaron slowly approached, hands open, palms up, pleading. Mom, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. There's always another way, I said. You just chose the one that took from me instead of asking for help. He looked like he might break, and maybe he needed to. Kara stood a step behind him, silent now, fear replacing arrogance. Thomas gathered everything into his briefcase. We'll finalize the paperwork and meet tomorrow with the notary. Tomorrow, I repeated with a nod. Tomorrow sounded hopeful, secure. Mine. Kara exhaled sharply. I can't believe you're doing this to your own family. No, I said, lifting my chin. I'm doing this because you are family. Confusion flickered across her face. If strangers tried to commit the same crime, I continued, I would have called the police already. The only reason you're not in handcuffs is because I loved you first. Aaron's breath caught. Kara looked away. Mabel squeezed my shoulder. Thomas closed his case with a decisive snap. We all stood in my living room, surrounded by what was left. Of trust, of home, of the day we would never forget. And I said the one sentence no one expected from the soft-spoken widow they thought they could outsmart. I'm not afraid of you anymore. That silenced even Kara. Thomas gave them the final instruction. Leave now. We have everything we need. Aaron nodded and reached for the doorknob, but paused. He looked back at me as if searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe. I wasn't ready to offer that yet. He would have to earn it. They stepped out onto the porch. The new lock clicked behind them. A small sound with the weight of a boundary finally set. And in that moment, I allowed myself to feel a spark of peace, a fragile one, but real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hallways of my home in silence, fingers brushing along the places where pictures had hung, where memories were supposed to feel safe. The house was locked and secure, but my heart felt like it had been left wide open. I sat in my armchair by the window, watching the moon reflect off the glass like a pale guardian. The phone in my hand was heavier than usual. I stared at Aaron's name on the screen for a long time before pressing call. He answered on the second ring. Mom? His voice was raw, like someone who had been crying or trying very hard not to. Are you alone? I asked. Yes, he whispered. Kara is at her sister's. I couldn't stay there tonight. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Good. There was a pause, soft, hesitant, aching. Mom, he whispered again. Please say something. Anything. So I did. You owe me the truth. Another breath, another pause. And then the dam finally broke. I lost my job, he confessed. 9 months ago. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I kept thinking I'd find a new one before you noticed. But the bills piled up, and Kara kept saying we needed a plan. That we deserved a house of our own. That we shouldn't keep struggling when you have so much space and we have so little. I closed my eyes. Struggling doesn't give you the right to steal. I know, he choked. I know that now. He sniffed hard. I could almost picture him wiping his face like he did when he was a boy trying to hide tears. Kara said the house would sell fast, he continued. She said Trevor already had buyers. She told me it was what Dad would have wanted. That pierced deeper than anything else yet. Don't you dare speak for him, I said softly. Your father valued honesty above everything. He would never approve of this. I know, he whispered again, and I hate myself for believing otherwise. Silence stretched between us, long and wounded. Then he spoke more quietly. There was a rumor, Mom, about something Dad left behind. Victor mentioned it once. I became obsessed with the idea. I thought maybe it was money, something hidden we could use to fix everything. My grip tightened around the phone. So you searched my house. You tore apart my memories. Because of a rumor. Yes. His breathing shook. And every time we found something valuable, Kara said we should put it aside. She convinced me that if you came back to a smaller place, a cleaner life, you'd be grateful later. She made it sound like we were doing you a favor. I stood up and walked slowly toward the cedar chest. Moonlight glinted off its surface, the wood rich and warm. You weren't doing me a favor, I said. You were taking advantage of the fact that I love you. I'm so sorry. His voice cracked again, fragile and desperate. I want to fix this. Please let me fix this. I rested my hand on the chest, remembering how Graham always locked away the things that mattered most. Not to hide them, to protect them. Do you regret what you've done? I asked. Or do you regret being caught? Aaron didn't hesitate. I regret hurting you. I regret losing myself. I regret every decision that led us to this moment. My eyes stung. I believe you want to do better, I said. But wanting isn't enough. What do I have to do? He asked, breath heaving like he was preparing to lift something heavy. You'll sign the restitution agreement tomorrow, I said. You'll return everything. You'll work to repair what can be repaired. You'll go to counseling, and you will rebuild trust with actions, not promises. I heard him inhale sharply, the kind of breath that comes before resolve. I will. I'll do all of that. And Aaron, I added softly, you will do it without her. Your marriage may not survive this. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He didn't even sigh. I think it was already gone, he said, voice hollow. I just didn't want to admit it. The house was silent except for the creak of the walls settling, as if even the structure itself was processing all that had happened. Tomorrow, I repeated, grounding both of us. We start tomorrow. I'll be there, he promised. And Mom? Yes? I love you. I never stopped. Tears finally gathered, warm and slow. I love you too, I whispered. But love needs respect to survive. He didn't respond with words, just breathing, human, hurting, trying. When we hung up, I didn't feel better, but I felt something close to truth. And truth, even painful, felt like progress. I placed my hand flat on the cedar chest one more time and whispered into the quiet. Integrity is what Graham left us, and I'm going to make sure we remember it. The next morning, the air felt strangely lighter, not healed, not yet, but open. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over the maple trees Graham planted decades ago. Their leaves shivered in the breeze, as if whispering that new beginnings sometimes arrive, disguised as consequences. Thomas arrived exactly on time, as he always did. He set his briefcase on the dining table, efficient and calm. The notary will meet us here in 30 minutes, he said. I've reviewed the final version of the restitution agreement. It covers return of property, repayment for damaged items, and mandatory counseling. I nodded. Thank you. He studied my face for a moment. How are you holding up? I'm steady, I answered. And it was true enough. Mabel arrived shortly after, carrying a small tin of biscuits. I figured we could use something sweet, she said with a warm smile. Bitterness is exhausting. I hugged her briefly, grateful for her presence. Together, we set the tin on the table. Then the doorbell rang. Aaron stood outside, alone. No Kara. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that reaches bone deep. His eyes were red, his hair uncombed. But most striking was the way he held himself. Shoulders low, hands visible, as if he were approaching a judge, not his mother. Come in, I said quietly. He stepped into the house like someone entering a church. His eyes moved over the walls he had stripped bare just yesterday, and he visibly winced. Thomas gestured to the chair across from me. We'll go through each section. If you have questions, ask them before signing. Aaron nodded. We reviewed everything line by line. Return of the china, repairs for the broken radio, retrieval of memorabilia from the truck and the pawn shop, confirmation that he would never enter the property uninvited, the repayment schedule, and the agreement to see a therapist every week, not because the law demanded it, but because I did. This is fair, he said after reading the final sentence. More than fair. Fair would have been never doing this to begin with, I said. This is accountability. His eyes flicked up in acknowledgement. There was no fight left in them, just acceptance. A short time later, the independent notary arrived. A woman with silver-streaked hair and a neutral tone that suggested she'd seen every kind of family conflict imaginable. She confirmed our IDs and set her materials neatly on the table. Thomas laid the agreement in front of Aaron, smoothing the pages like he was preparing a sacred document. Sign and date here, he instructed. This finalizes your consent. Aaron looked down at the pen. His hand trembled, but he pressed the tip to the paper anyway. The first signature came slow, then the second. The ink absorbed into the fibers like a promise sinking into the past. The notary stamped each page with careful precision. Each thud felt like a verdict. Then Aaron opened his backpack and removed 2 envelopes, placing them in front of me. Here, he said. Cashier's check and cash. $10,000. It's everything we have right now. It's a start. I wasn't expecting that. The gesture pulled at a part of my heart I was trying hard to keep guarded. Thomas inspected the money, counted it, and slid it into his folder. Documented, he said. Aaron exhaled shakily, as if he'd been holding his breath for months. And, he continued, reaching into the backpack again, I called Leon last night. I can get the brooch back this week. Mabel smiled at him for the first time in days. Good, she said. That's something you should fix yourself. He nodded, grateful for even that small redemption. Then Thomas picked up his tablet. There's one more thing you need to know. His voice cooled, professional again. We obtained a copy of an email chain between your wife, Evelyn Cho, and a notary linked to Trevor. They scheduled a meeting to transfer the deed while Selena was away, the same day the moving truck was booked. I felt my pulse drop like a stone. Aaron's face drained of color. She planned the deed transfer without me knowing? Thomas showed him the screen. The email was clear. Kara was not helping him. She was using him. Aaron's hand hovered over his mouth. I thought, she said it would be a joint decision. The truth hit him like a wave he wasn't ready for. And in that moment, I saw something shift in him. The last thread of denial finally snapping. He looked up at me. Mom, I'll do better. I swear I will. I'm done letting people manipulate me. I'm done letting fear decide my choices. I nodded slowly. Then let your actions show me who you want to become. The notary finished her final stamp and gathered her materials. All set, she said. This agreement is now in effect. Aaron stood, wiping his palms against his pants, trying to collect what was left of his composure. He turned toward me fully. I know I can't fix everything overnight, he said. But I'm ready to try, and I will earn your trust back, one day at a time. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Thomas closed his briefcase with a satisfied click. We move forward, he said to me. And as Aaron walked out the front door into the uncertain light of the day, I watched a new kind of story begin. One where he had to rebuild his life from the ground he had nearly burned. He paused on the porch and looked back once more. Not to beg, not to bargain, but to acknowledge the line he had crossed. And the one he would now spend every day trying to step back toward. The door shut softly behind him. Another click. Another boundary honored. The house was quiet when evening rolled in. Too quiet. The kind that reminds you what you've lost rather than what you've saved. I stood at the sink, rinsing a mug that wasn't even dirty, just needing something familiar to hold on to. Then I heard tires crunching against the curb outside. I moved slowly to the front window and peered through the blinds. Trevor Caldwell's black SUV. And beside him, Cara, her posture, sharp and rigid, like someone ready to fight. Not for love or family, but for what she believed she was owed. My chest tightened. They were back. Before I had the chance to open the door, Thomas stepped out from the kitchen, phone already in hand. I saw the headlights, he said. I'm staying right here. Mabel, who had insisted on helping me lock up the house tonight, set down her cup of tea and stood behind me like a silent pillar. You don't have to deal with this alone. The doorbell rang once. Impatient, demanding. I opened the door halfway, keeping my shoulder firm against it. Trevor didn't waste a second. We need to get inside, he said, voice slick with authority he did not possess. We're finishing what we started. No, I replied. One word, strong enough to hold the line. Cara stepped forward. Her makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion, but stubbornness glowed like fire in her eyes. You think you can just shut us out? We have rights. Thomas moved into view. Actually, you don't. There is a signed agreement and recorded documentation preventing any further entry without permission. Any violation now can trigger immediate legal action. Trevor sneered. Spare me the lawyer talk. This house is more than she can handle. We're trying to help. Help yourself, Mabel shot back. Let's not pretend otherwise. Trevor ignored her and leaned closer, voice low and condescending. Selena, you're being manipulated. You're old, tired. This house is a burden. You will thank us someday. I felt a familiar ache rise inside me. The ache of being underestimated. Before I could respond, footsteps sounded behind me. Aaron emerged from the hallway, shoulders square, chin lifted. For the first time in a long time, he looked like he remembered who raised him. You need to leave, he said to them, voice steady in a way that surprised all of us. Now, Cara blinked. What? Aaron, don't be ridiculous. You signed under pressure. We can undo that. Trevor says. Trevor doesn't speak for me, Aaron interrupted. Not anymore. Trevor's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. Aaron stepped closer, positioning himself directly between me and them. No, I made the mistake yesterday. Today, I protect my mother. The shift in him was like watching a cracked structure straighten and hold. You broke into her home, he continued. You tried to steal everything important to her. You lied to me, used me. That ends now. Kara's voice wavered. Aaron, we need this. No, he said firmly. We need integrity. That's what Dad taught us, and I lost sight of it listening to you. Trevor barked a cold laugh. Integrity doesn't pay debt. Aaron held his ground. Mom will get her things back. And if you come near this house again, the camera footage and the signed documents will do the talking. Thomas stepped forward, holding up his phone. I'm calling the sheriff if you don't leave, right now. Kara looked betrayed that her plan had collapsed, not because of the law, but because the man she thought she could direct had stopped following. Trevor glared, scanning the porch as though searching for a loophole. There was none. Aaron spoke again, voice softer now. Leave before you lose any chance of fixing what's left. For a moment, Kara's mouth tightened. Fury, fear, resentment all tangled together. Then she turned and walked toward the SUV, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Trevor followed, but before getting in, he pointed a warning finger toward us. This isn't over. Aaron stared him down. Yes, it is. The SUV tore away from the curb, red taillights disappearing into the neighborhood darkness. Aaron stayed at the door, breathing heavily, as if holding the line had cost him almost everything he had left. I stepped beside him and rested a hand gently on his arm. Thank you, I said, for choosing the right side. His eyes glistened, tired but clearer than they'd been in months. I should have done it sooner. We can start now, I replied. He nodded, swallowing hard. I'll earn back your trust, one day at a time. Mabel smiled through tears. You did good tonight, dear. Thomas pocketed his phone and exhaled slowly. Boundary set, he said, and respected. Aaron stayed by the door for another moment, letting the silence settle. A silence that, for the first time, didn't feel threatening or empty. It felt protective, strong, right. He whispered, almost to himself. Integrity is the inheritance. If I don't protect my mother today, I lose everything Dad hoped for me. I didn't have words. Pride and sorrow shared space in my chest, each alive and real. The night air was cool when I finally closed the door. Click. A sound that felt sacred now. This house had been under siege, but now it felt defended. The house grew quiet again after Aaron left with Thomas and Mabel. The kind of quiet that doesn't frighten you, but invites you to listen. I stood a moment longer in the living room, letting my breathing settle, letting the fear fall away piece by piece until all that remained was determination. There was something I needed to do, something that had been calling to me ever since the moment I saw the cedar chest tampered with. I walked upstairs, each step steady, deliberate. I paused outside the closet, laid my hand on the wooden door, and slowly opened it. The scent of cedar rose up like a memory. Warm, safe, familiar. That smell had always reminded me of Graham coming home from the sea. He'd place his coat in here, and I would bury my face in the fabric just to breathe him in. Now I knelt before the chest, fingertips tracing the carvings my mother had made before gifting it to us. Generations of love sealed into the grain. I unlatched the lid gently, this time ready for what I might find. There, tucked beneath a folded sweater, was a small envelope sealed with red wax. The wax bore Graham's initials. G.W. My breath trembled. I lifted the envelope with both hands, cradling it as though it were something alive and fragile. My name was written on the front, in his handwriting. Selena. I sat down right there on the floor, the closet light casting a soft glow on everything around me. I ran my thumb along the edge of the envelope before breaking the seal. Inside was a letter. His voice, captured on paper. I unfolded it slowly and began to read. My love, if you are reading this, it means you found it the right way. With honesty, with heart. Not through force, not through fear. You always told me that our legacy would be the love we shared. I believe that. But I also know how the world can twist things when money or property become involved. So here is what I want you to remember, especially if times get difficult. Integrity is the inheritance, and the person who honors that most is the one who truly deserves anything I leave behind. There is a safety deposit box. The key is enclosed. I trust you'll know what to do with what you find inside. Always, always yours. Graham. I read it once, then again, and again. Tears didn't fall. Not at first. Instead, a wave of warmth washed over me. Relief, validation, love that endured beyond breath. He had known this day might come. He had known I might be tested, and he had given me the tools to protect myself, not with anger, but with values. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out a small metal key attached to a thin chain. It shimmered when it caught the light. On the tag were 3 simple words punched into the metal. Safe deposit box. My fingers curled around the key. Its edges pressed into my palm. A reminder that some truths are sharp enough to cut through lies. I carefully placed the letter back into its envelope and held it against my chest. I could almost hear Graham's voice in the silence, steady and sure. He hadn't left money for greed to chase. He had left proof that character mattered more than cash. Downstairs, the house still felt bruised, but in that closet, I felt something return to me. Strength I thought had been packed away along with those memories. I stood and wiped a stray tear finally rolling down my cheek. Thank you, I whispered into the cedar-scented air. I'll do this right. I closed the chest and rested my hand on it for one more moment. The wood was cool, but my heart was warm. This was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of claiming what truly belonged to me. Not just the home, but the peace inside it. I stepped out of the closet with the envelope in one hand and the key in the other. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank. Tomorrow, I would learn exactly what Graham wanted me to see. Whatever awaited me in that safe deposit box, I was ready now, because integrity wasn't just Graham's inheritance. It was mine too. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, not from worry, but from purpose. For the first time in days, I brewed coffee without feeling my hands tremble. The envelope with Graham's letter rested safely inside my purse, the small key attached to its chain tucked securely beside it. Thomas picked me up just after 10. When I stepped into his car, he nodded toward my purse. You have the key? I do, I said, holding the strap a little tighter. He offered a reassuring smile. Whatever is in that box, you're not facing it alone. The drive to the bank was quiet but steady, the kind of silence filled with possibility rather than fear. The building rose ahead of us in clean lines of glass and brick, sunlight flashing across the polished windows. It felt too modern to be holding something so personal, so rooted in my history. But that was the point. Safety secured by steel and protocol. Inside, the cool air hummed with quiet business. Thomas approached the counter with the calm confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating systems like these. We're here to access a safe deposit box belonging to Selena Whitaker, he told the teller. We have the key. The teller nodded and checked the records. "Of course, Mrs. Whitaker," she said kindly. "Please follow me." She led us down a hallway lined with framed certificates and awards, then into a private vault room with a heavy door that slid shut behind us. A security guard stood nearby, watchful but unobtrusive. "Whenever you're ready," Thomas said softly. My fingers brushed the envelope again for courage. I pulled the small key from my purse and slipped it into the tiny lock on the metal box. The key turned smoothly, like it had been waiting for this moment. With a soft scrape of metal on metal, the box slid out. I carried it to the small table in the corner and set it down gently. For a moment, I simply stared at it. My heart beat in my ears. Graham's final secret, his final gift, the truth beneath all the rumors and fear. I opened the lid. There were no stacks of money, no property deeds, no investments or jewels. Instead, the first thing I saw was a carefully wrapped bundle of photographs. I lifted them slowly, pictures of Graham in uniform, his medals, a folded American flag certificate from his honorable service, a ticket stub from our first date, a movie neither of us remembered except for the way our hands finally found each other in the dark. My throat tightened. Beneath the photographs lay my father's wartime radio. Restored. The antenna straight, the dial replaced, the metal polished to a soft shine. Graham must have taken it before his health worsened, planning to return it to me when it was whole again. A sob rose, quiet but unstoppable. I pressed my hand to my mouth, overwhelmed by the love preserved here. Then I saw a small white envelope, marked with one simple line. For Aaron. My fingers hovered above it but didn't touch. That was not mine to open. It was meant for a son who needed to relearn what inheritance truly meant. Thomas watched respectfully, allowing me the space to breathe through all of it. The guard remained still, a silent witness to the moment. At the bottom of the box lay a single check. Not for a large amount, not a hidden fortune, just $1. On the memo line, in Graham's unmistakable handwriting, "Integrity is the inheritance." The tears finally fell freely. This wasn't just sentiment. It was structure, protection, proof that our lives were worth more than any market value. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew something like this could happen. And he left a lesson instead of a loophole." Thomas nodded, his voice low with respect. "He understood that character is what sustains a family, not money." I carefully returned each item to the box, except the envelope addressed to Aaron. That one I held close to my chest. Thomas didn't object. Some things should be delivered by a mother's hand. As we prepared to leave, the security guard stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said politely, "I should tell you, earlier this week, a couple came in asking about safe deposit access. We turned them away because they didn't have authorization." My breath caught. "A couple?" He nodded. "A woman and a man. They kept asking about box numbers and claiming a family emergency. Kara and Trevor. Even here, they had tried to invade what was sacred, but the attempt failed. Because some doors can only be opened with love, not manipulation." Thomas placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, more than safe." I carried the envelope for Aaron tightly, as though the thin paper were stronger than any legal document. As we stepped back into the sunlit parking lot, something inside me shifted. A release, a renewal. The world looked different. Not because anything outside had changed yet, but because I had. I had proof. I had boundaries. I had my husband's wisdom guiding me still. And now I had the most important truth of all. Nothing truly valuable had ever been in those boxes on the truck. It had been here in this quiet metal drawer all along. Faith in a son who had lost his way, and the love that would help him find it again. I closed my hand around the envelope for Aaron and whispered into the morning breeze, "We'll do this right, Graham." Then Thomas opened the car door for me, and we headed home, not to a battleground anymore, but to a place where healing could finally begin. The next days passed quietly, like the house needed time to heal just as much as I did. I found myself pausing more often in each room, touching surfaces that once felt normal and now felt sacred. Graham's restored radio sat on the shelf where it belonged, antenna gleaming as though it had never been bent by careless hands. I would turn the knob once in a while just to hear the soft crackle of static, proof that some things survive storms. Aaron came by every morning. He arrived early, before the sun burned away the night's coolness, ready to work. He replaced broken hinges, patched up small holes in the walls, carefully rehung the remaining photographs with reverence he should have shown them long before. He carried himself differently now. No urgency to leave, no excuses waiting on his tongue, just effort. Every afternoon, he left for counseling with Dr. Renee Fields. When he returned, he didn't talk about what was said. He didn't have to. Progress has its own language: softer eyes, straighter spine, longer breaths. On the fourth day, Victor Lang came to the door holding his cap in his hands like a peace offering. His voice cracked with remorse. "Selena, I'm sorry for putting that idea in his head. I thought it was harmless talk. I never imagined it would lead to all this." I nodded and smiled gently. "You didn't force anyone to make bad choices, Victor. But thank you for saying that. Sometimes closure is a handshake. Sometimes it's just acknowledging the wound." Mabel brought fresh flowers every few days, placing them on the dining table without asking. She never pried. She simply sat with me during tea, reminding me quietly that real family isn't always tied by blood. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in amber, Aaron climbed down from fixing a curtain rod and stood awkwardly near the living room door. "There's something I want to do," he said. His hands were clasped, fingers knotted together like a prayer. I waited. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope, the one from the safe deposit box. "I haven't opened it yet. I wanted to wait until I could show you I deserved it." I stepped closer, my heart both fragile and strong. "Open it," I said. He slipped his thumb under the flap, unfolding the paper inside. Graham's handwriting emerged, steady and familiar even in grief. "Aaron, what matters most is not what you inherit, but who you become. If you choose honesty and courage, you will always have enough. I believe in the man you can be. Make me proud. Dad." Aaron held the letter to his chest, eyes squeezed shut. A single tear slid down and landed on the paper. Not a sign of weakness, but resolution. "I'm going to make him proud," he whispered. "And you too." "I know," I replied, placing a hand over his. "One day at a time." He nodded, breathing in, then out, steady and sure. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "As long as you don't give up on yourself," I said. That night, after Aaron left, I walked him to the door. The new lock glimmered softly in the porch light. I turned the key slowly. Click. Not a barricade. Not a warning. Just protection. A promise to myself that my home and my peace would always be guarded. I stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool air brush against my skin. The neighborhood was calm, porch lights flickering like stars that had come down to live among us. Graham's words echoed quietly in my thoughts, steady as the ground beneath me. Integrity is the inheritance. I smiled, not with victory, but with relief. Boundaries had been drawn. Justice had been served quietly. Love had not been stolen after all. It had been recovered. I locked the door behind me again, not with fear, but with confidence. The sound of that final click resonated through the house and through me. I was home, truly home. And I wasn't afraid anymore.